Okay, quick introduction from me. I think there are a few new people on the call, either because they're colleagues or we've had quite a few new people obviously join the peer group, continuous conveyor belt people joining the peer group. So we're over 602 or 600 nature practitioners now. I think it's over 400 companies. Growing very nicely, so thank you very much. My name's Oliver Hurry. I'm the chair. I'm here with my co-chair Melissa Miners, who I'm sure many of you know, and also, as many of you I'm sure know, we're now getting a lot of wonderful help from the wonderful team at Biodiversity. Some more from Sam in a second. But why do we exist? A very good question. Uh, we all want to just make better coordinated, confident action on nature and biodiversity. There's a huge amount of stuff going on, whether it's EUDR or just everything that's going on with COP and everything else. It's a huge challenge to navigate all. This is a peer group where we're helping the people, not companies. You don't join as a company, you join as a person, and we're all trying to catch up on everything that's going on. And we're increasingly now very proactively trying to get work to happen with you all, not just learning and sharing, but actually get projects off the ground. So more and more of you are coming to us with ideas and specific things, which we're now starting to see, which you'll see more of today. It's been very kindly funded by some peers who wanted to get some stuff done, like that's GSK, Schneider Electric, HSBC, but it is always free, as you guys know. We do have our in-person strategy days again happening in February in London, which is going incredibly well. It's very exciting. We had our last one in May. So if you didn't come to in May, I highly recommend coming to again in Feb. And if you're seeing it coming again in Feb and you were there in May, wonderful. You know what this is all about, and if you don't, then you'll find out very quickly as we go through this. What we're going to do today, so I'm going to hand over to Sam and to say hello and obviously give us a bit of an update on their work as well. I'm going to give you a bit of an update on what we're doing in Feb, and Melissa will give you a hint at some of the stuff that's happening there. And we've just had COP, of course, nature-centric climate COP. I don't know if anyone else agrees with that's what it felt like, that's what it sounded like. But as again, we'll have a bit of a reflection on that. If you were there or if you've got some reflections on it, please do put your hand up when we come into that. It'd be great to see what you think and thought of it. We're going to be updating on some specific projects. Many of you have been involved in the wonderful projects that have been happening with the peer group that really are honing in on how we talk to procurement and ultimately suppliers in particular categories. And we started working on that on categories like IT and tech, property, professional services, all thanks to Anna and the brilliant team at HSBC who've been working on that with Lewis Howard at Bray. So more on that project, and the outputs are coming soon. So you'll be able to get a bit of a sneak preview on that. Then Hannah at the Brilliant Halion, or Brilliant Hannah from Brilliant Halion. I guess they're both brilliant. Certainly alliterative, which is great. Thanks for having coming on, Hannah. You're going to share a little bit about what you've been working on and a bit of a call for collaboration as well. So that's going to be great, all about sustainable sourcing. Then we've got the
Hello.
final part of the session. I have got your slides as well, Hannah, all locked
All
and
right,
loaded.
perfect.
Yeah, you
Sounds
just
good.
tell me what to press, or I'll kind of guess, and we'll make it work.
Yeah,
And then in the final bit of the meeting, we obviously try to get together and discuss various different things, and we almost choose our breakout rooms and get together. And we're going to have plenty of time for that, so we've got some chance to really have some chats with each other about what you're working on. Now we've suggested some topics here. One thing I will also be doing is putting a poll up very shortly for you to sort of select some of the topics that you'd like to maybe explore today, but also explore perhaps in the future. And if you've got other suggestions, please put them in the chat. A lot of what we'll be doing today is also fine-tuning our plan for our February meeting as well. So if there's anything that's really burning or obvious or key, do let us know. Um, so February, Melissa, do you want to give us a bit of a flavour of what you've been working on for February, and I can cover perhaps more the logistics of it. Any thoughts from you?
sure. So I don't know if you can hear me. I'm actually on my hotspot, which is really annoying because I've got
Yeah,
no
you're fine.
internet. No internet as well as a sick child today. Um,
Joy.
so we've got we've got loads of great speakers confirmed. We've still got some slots, and we're having lots of conversations with companies. But if anyone wants to be part of it and wants to kind of either present a case study, present a problem, contribute to one of the panels, just get in touch with me. That would be great. So far we've got Krista McGuire from Pfizer, who's going to be talking about embedding nature into decision-making frameworks. We've got GSK talking about the certification project. We've got Metzer Group talking beyond EUDR. So they've got a standout due diligence framework that they use for their timber sourcing, and they're going to talk about how they've embedded that in the company and even exited some suppliers as a consequence of the tight due diligence. We've got Anna from HSBC, who's going to talk a bit today, so I won't go too much into that now. We've got Bristol Myers Squibb talking about pharma, nature supply chains. Schneider Electric, a session with the Nature Tech Collective looking at the impact of tools, potentially Unilever talking about impact and assurance plus advocacy and how they link this up on nature. Conversations happening with Kingfisher, Diageo, WBCSD, Global Environment Facilities. So lots happening, but keen to get more people involved. So please get in touch.
Awesome. Great. And just to give everyone a context of this, in my absolute madness, I've decided to run the Scope 3 strategy days in the same week as the Nature strategy days. So we have over 300, nearly 400 people coming to the Scope 3 strategy days on Monday, the 2nd of Feb. The 3rd of Feb is the main day. And then on the 4th of Feb, we're having a nature and climate joint day. So this is where the nature peers and the Scope 3 peers will get together and talk about that alignment and crossover between nature and climate, particularly how to get your business to care about nature as much as they care about climate, I think, is put bluntly. And Krista, obviously from Pfizer, is going to be helping a lot with that, and is helping to pull together a really fascinating set of workshops for that. And then we have our main day, the Nature Strategy Day, on the 5th. And we have, as I said, plenty of people coming, plenty of problems, and we're now just sort of finalising, choosing who's going to talk about it. So huge thanks to Melissa for obviously pulling us all together. But again, anyone wants to share, wants to learn, let us know. Anyway, we really can't handle this all alone, so delighted to be working with Biodiversity. I know many of you know them and recommended them to us. So, Sam, do you want to say hello, update us a little bit on what you've been working on? I know we had our wonderful Q event, of course, which will make everyone that didn't go very jealous, I'm sure. And obviously, you've pulled together a bit of a slide explaining some of the challenges that you've collected from our recent meetings, including the Q event, which I've got as our next slide. So, over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much. So there's a little bit of background. My name's Sam Sinclair. My background's in conservation. So I spent a decade in Africa doing everything from anti-poaching to finding lost species and generally on the ground conservation, and then founded Biodiversity to help people make better decisions about nature. And our team is comprised of lots of people who are sort of backgrounds in actual conservation, who spent time in the field doing various bits and bobs and PhDs and consulting experience, all that kind of stuff. And what we found from kind of the start really is that we end up doing two almost completely different jobs with our clients. One is we help them do nature strategies, analysis, all that kind of good stuff. And the other is we help people who are doing jobs that have often never been done before in companies that have never had a nature role before, understand how do they actually make things progress? How do they get traction? How do they make the business case? How do they convince senior leadership that nature is important? And that kind of affinity of there was quite a strong affinity with the purpose of the nature peer groups. That's why we've come on board to play a role in this. As we see that often it's difficult to know how to approach things. It's not like there's a kind of grizzled veteran who's been doing this for a decade who you can speak to and get to. For most companies, these jobs didn't exist 2 years ago. So people are having to figure out how to do this on the fly without really someone, in many cases, someone who's got all the answers or the handbook or anything nice like this. And the Q event that we had recently was an event specifically designed for meeting this kind of emerging need. So we had people from 53 companies, so the collection of, I think the headline revenue was about 1.4 trillion put together. So about South Korea, slightly larger than South Korea in terms of size. And the whole purpose of that event was to allow people to come together to learn off each other, talk to each other about their experiences and their challenges, and start to brainstorm solutions to these kinds of things. So it's very much a kind of a contributor to this whole peer group in terms of the ethos and the spirit and hopefully some of the materials. And we're actually taking we took copious notes at all these roundtables, and we're producing what are going to be some very short kind of explainers, really, super practical outputs that we're going to start publishing in the new year that will hopefully answer lots of the same questions that people in this peer group raise and want to talk about. And that'll all be free and hosted and all that kind of good stuff. One of the other things we've been doing is pulling together your challenges. So lots of information has been collected along the way. The peer queue, but also every single time everyone enters their challenges and problems they're encountering. And what we've been doing, and by we, I mean Maria, who currently isn't here, but she should claim all of the credit, has been going through all of this information and starting to make it make sense. And you can sort of see a small screenshot there of what is quite a large, multifaceted Excel spreadsheet, essentially at this stage, where we've taken in sources from the data from all these different sources and started to process it to start to pull out what are people's priorities, what are the trends that we're seeing, what are the challenges that people want to talk about. And the purpose of this is to make sure that we're tracking this information that you share with us as we progress on this nature journey together, and turning it into something that we can actually where we can draw out the evidence, draw out the common themes, and actually track things as they change over time. Because what we've been seeing sort of anecdotally is that the kinds of problems that people encounter now are completely different to the ones that people were talking about a year ago, and almost certainly will be quite different next summer when people have gone a bit further on their nature journeys in parallel. So at the moment, the biggest ones that are coming up is the nature business case. This is a topic that's so popular that at Q we had to have 2 roundtables just on this topic because one wasn't enough. Every other topic we had 1 roundtable. That one we had to double up, and even then I think we almost had 3. We just didn't have enough space for 3. Everybody at the moment is talking about how they're having to figure out how to translate the implications of impact, expenses, risks, and opportunities into a clear argument that helps people in the company understand why nature matters to the business. And that's partly what we're going to touch on that later in one of the roundtables. There's also some work on collaborative supply chain engagement. So how can we set up standardized approaches or work together to identify how to use certification schemes, other kinds of resources to support supply chain practices. Data sharing, all things technical and quantitative, this comes a lot. And that comes into the next one, materiality and measurement and metrics. I must confess, as a social scientist, this is slightly out of my comfort zone, but I have CISO and a few others from our team who are much more quantitative than me. EUDR, this is a big one. All the drama that surrounds that, as well as how to actually do it. And then TNFD, and increasingly, so fantastic that Krista is here, how to link this with TCFD. People are starting to see more and more that these are 2 sides of the same coin, and how do we bring these things together. So we will continue updating this, as I mentioned, and turn it into some kind of lovely infographic style slide that we can bring as it adapts and show how things are tracking over time, and also make sure that we're meeting all of these needs both in person in February and in these sessions going forwards.
Brilliant, fantastic. And we're definitely moving from Ollie plus ChatGPT into genuine people who know what they're actually talking about, and some real intelligence managing all of this data as well. So I really appreciate it. That one look at that spreadsheet makes me come out in a cold sweat. So to know that someone's actually properly putting an analysis around this is wonderful. As we just for a second while we carry on, I'm going to launch a poll about which of some of the topics, and not all of them are on here, but there's a reason for that. If there's anything that in particular you guys listening in want to dive into deeper, some of these will be the breakout rooms later. Some of them will be tackled later on. Obviously, with EUDR, the gift that keeps on giving, if you're interested in exploring that yet again, we're very keen to know that. So we'll run that in the background while we carry on. So do you want to update us on the certification work that you've been doing with one of our peers as well?
Amazing, thank you so much. CISO is going to take this one away, as this is far more your world than mine.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm CISO La Rosa, and I think many of you heard from me before last time. I'm in a project with GSK that it started with this big question about quantifying the benefits of certified materials. So I'm going to give you a little overview again, and then a little update on what's been happening. Many know companies are using certification schemes to achieve ambitions, and many towards nature positive ambitions, but there's very little data to understand how they deliver against corporate commitments. So this project came about to build a framework methodology that uses an LCA approach to try to quantify the benefits of using certified versus non-certified materials. And the idea for it being an open access framework methodology that could be hopefully applicable to different certification schemes. Ultimately, as the question suggests, the goal is to measure and share the quantitative benefits of purchasing certified materials. But we're starting with one thing at a time. So GSK has funded a scoping project to work towards this question, which we started in November. The scope for this is mostly focusing on FSC, but we've identified the other certification schemes that would be of interest. The project, what we've done so far is it's kind of into 4 steps. The first one is, of course, looking at what methods are out there. We've had some conversations with some of you. If you have anything that you think would be useful for this or you're interested, please do reach out. You have the emails there. But anyway, we looked at what's out there, which as potentially many of you know, there's not much. There's a lot for certified organic, but for others, there's much less for other materials. So we've done that. We've had a workshop with GSK just to align on what are the key certification schemes. As I said, number 1 is FSC. Number 2 will be ASI, so the Aluminium Stewardship Initiative, and there are others. And we'd also figured out what the key benefits that we're trying to quantify. So the key one that we're going to focus on for the scoping is GHG emission reductions. But of course, there's interest in other potential benefits like deforestation, no deforestation or land use change. There was also interest in reduced impacts on freshwater biodiversity. But the key one, as I said before, is being reductions to support Scope 3 targets. We're in the process right now of reviewing the certification schemes and the data to putting meetings in place to understand better what could and could not be done. And then finally, we're putting all of these together. That's the next step into a framework methodology that will be laid out as a plan. The idea is that the plan will define very clearly what are the questions that this can answer, what are the boundaries and limitations of specifically an LCA methodology, how it can be transferred, or under which circumstances, what are the things that you would need to consider to transfer the methods onto another certification scheme, considerations for expanding onto other pressures beyond GHG emissions. And then also it will include key considerations for methodological considerations for when this goes open as an open bid, because hopefully, of course, this will be piloted in the next year if there's enough interest. It will outline a high-level estimate and budget and timeline. So a bit of what we've done so far and what we're hoping to achieve by early the next year. So this can be shared in person in February.
Lovely. Thank you very much. That's amazing. So yeah, I mean, this is the sort of projects that we're starting to surface that people can get involved in. I know many of you have actually already indicated that. So please do keep reminding us or dropping us a note, and we'll bring you into that conversation for this project. Lovely. I think we should probably have a chat about COP. I would have thought. Sam, maybe reflections from yourself, and I know Melissa, there's a few people that are keen to sort of share their thoughts as well. But if anyone else wants to share their reflections of COP, please do. We've got plenty plenty of time in the next sort of few minutes to discuss it. So over to you, Sam.
I think let's start with the people that Melissa has identified.
Even
So
better.
Anna from Tandem Global, are you there? Yeah.
Yes, hi, I'm here. How are you?
Hey,
Good
Anna.
morning, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, sure. I can share some insights. I went to COP. I was there right in the middle. So during those 2 weeks, I was right in the middle. I went there to spend the days of finance and social economy, social biodiversity economy, and the 2 nature days. So what I can say, well, Belém was messy, loud, disruptive, but also very transformative. I have the feeling that with all the criticism that came before towards the Brazilian government of having chosen the Amazon region for hosting a COP in a city that is probably very, very difficult logistically to host such a big conference. At the end, it delivered. It delivered what it had to deliver. However, I mean, it was one big COP. We had, I think, around 70,000 registered delegates around different zones. You have the blue zone, that is the negotiation zone, green zone. You have the free zone that was about events and cultural. So you would be there not just for the negotiations, but the whole city was 24 hours providing entertainment for every single delegate. So it was very nice. From my personal experience, this is not my first COP, but it was what made me feel that it was a good decision to have this in the Amazon was when I was landing in the plane. It looked like a small UN system in that plane. We had hundreds of different people in there. But while we were landing, everyone was just stick to the windows because they wanted to see the Amazon. And this is, I think, was really nice because all these delegates, a lot of them work for the forest, work for reducing emissions, and have never been in an Amazon region. So this was really nice for me. And some takeaways is that yes, nature was in the center of the discussions. Everywhere I was in every single session, there was always a mention surrounding nature and the linkage to climate change. So that nexus, I think, is there and is there to stay, and the conversations are probably going in that direction. One big issue too, TNFD is there to stay as well. So we had several initiatives that is going to harmonize as the different frameworks, and ISB, for example, have also started to align with TNFD. And several countries also already mentioned that they would like to see TNFD in a more mandatory way. So you will see TNFD coming more and more into the central part of reporting. One thing that wasn't as expected was the phase out of fossil fuels. That was not very seen very positively because the last final text of the COP did reduce the language on that. However, outside of that negotiations, Colombia and the Netherlands, they said they will host the first conference on phasing out fossil fuels in Santa Marta in February 2026. So there is push from several countries to really see how that phasing out of fossil fuels can be integrated more heavily into the UNFCCC. And another big breakthrough, there has been a lot of pledges financially for climate adaptation. So that has been very, very good. Also, there are now some certain indicators and metrics for adaptation in the text. So you will hear far more from adaptation now than before. And nature-based solutions, they were everywhere. So this, as again, nature was in the center of this. So you have the Belém roadmap for nature-based solutions, etc., that are going to be pushing for more solutions like that. So companies, specifically for companies, you will be seeing that more and more coming into your portfolio. So these were my takeaways that I was really keen to share. And also one last thing that blew off my mind was the presence of indigenous people in local communities. I've never seen that before in any COP. And this one was really the cup of the people, and you could see this and feel it throughout all the days of the COP. And they have now gained more a stronger voice during the negotiations as well, and you will continue having that also. And so I think the Brazilian government delivered, and I was glad to be part of that very excited COP 30. Thanks.
Excellent. Sounds great. Yeah, I mean, I was impressed by how much there seemed to be sort of forest linked finance and
Yes.
so on as well. That seemed to be, and again, that conversation about nature as a solution for the climate challenges seems to be getting stronger and stronger.
Yes,
Um,
the TFFF was launched and gained a lot of support, and it has already a big capital seed. So it's moving forward. It's a very interesting mechanism that the Brazilian put together. So I think that is something to look forward for.
And for those who don't know, the TFFF is the Tropical Forest Forever Fund, which rewards countries for keeping a tree standing. The trickle-down effect that has on forest policies around the world is huge. So
the TFFF, they're really going for acronyms now. That's one that actually rolls off the tongue relatively well, isn't it? Excellent. Great. Any other reflections from anyone else? Anyone thoughts? Maybe Sam, maybe you want to add your thoughts, and as other people want to consider or ask questions.
I wasn't actually there, so I can't. But
Neither was I. I can still have an opinion. I'm really bad.
I think it's really interesting that there was such a strong presence from the People's COP, who described it. That's a story that's not really on the news so much, but is actually a hugely powerful one if we're seeing that coming in more and more.
Yeah. It feels like it's a shame that the next COP isn't going to be in Australia. It's in Turkey, isn't it, if I remember rightly? Because it feels like taking these COPs to the places where the impact is being felt, I think, is that Pacific Islands piece is a shame. But it still sounds like there's going to be lots happening down there.
Yes, it was a little bit frustrating, because it would have been a very nice next step on the continuation of the involvement of indigenous people as well, and continuing the momentum. But unfortunately, Turkey and Australia were not they didn't come to an agreement, and so this is the best of the solutions, to have it in Turkey and hosted by Australia.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else want to add any thoughts? Otherwise, we can look forward if we want to. I suppose it'd probably be better. I'll just leave it a second just in case. Okay. Brilliant. Let's move on. Let's look forward, shall we, rather than back. Okay. So I'd like to invite Anna and Lewis now to add the update from what we've been working on with the project. So as many of you know, one thing that is I'm very passionate about, and we're passionate about across both the Scope 3 and the Nature P groups, is the role of procurement and embedding climate and nature action into the hands of the people that are engaging directly with suppliers. And it's something that's a real, as I said, priority for me, regardless of what the topic is, including human rights as well as everything else. So I was delighted when Anna and also Lewis, who I've known for a very long time, came to us with a suggestion to help us really get to the heart of engaging category managers, procurement professionals on what nature means for them and bringing it to life quite a lot. So we've been running some great workshops, and thanks all of you for getting involved as well. But over to you, Anna, and then Lewis to give us a bit of an update on where you are and why you did it. Perhaps to start with you, Anna.
Okay, sure. I'll focus maybe on the why and then hand over to Louise to provide the latest update. So, my name is Anna Richardson and I lead the supply chain sustainability team at HSBC. We are part of the global procurement organization and really focusing our efforts across the entire ESG agenda. I would want to say that over the last year or so, we've put a lot of effort to elevate the agenda of nature across the ESG portfolio. So we have extracted nature as a standalone pillar, and we have also started with running materiality assessment to understand where are the hotspots within our supply chain, both from the locations point of view, but also from the sector's point of view. And that allowed us really to be in a position to start thinking about what our strategy will be going forward. And we very much wanted it to focus on the effective management of both the risks that are coming from nature and biodiversity, but also think about the identification of opportunities and nature positive action that we can drive. So this project and the collaboration with Ollie and Louis really is focusing on the identification of risks and equipping our procurement colleagues in the right tools and methodologies to be able to do so. So we started the collaboration in Q1 of this year, and it's very much focused on developing what we are calling sustainable sourcing roadmaps. So in simple terms, I would say it's a set of criteria for specific goods or services that you want to be in place, or you would like your suppliers to execute in order for you to state that you are sustainably sourcing those goods or those services. So because of our very much service focused outlook, we started the exercise with workshops focusing on real estate, professional and support services, and also travel and accommodation. And we are now at the stage where the outputs are being finalized by Louis and the guys from Bray, and we will be able to share those with you at the face-to-face meeting in February, and Louis will talk a little bit about it in a minute. But in terms of what's next, at least from my point of view, and how you guys can use it as well, is I want those sustainable sourcing roadmaps and the criteria to form the basis of our supplier engagement for nature next year. So far, we've been engaging our suppliers very much on carbon. Next year, we want to engage it into nature, and we want to focus on the suppliers within our hotspots when it comes to location and when it comes to certain categories. And we want to socialize those sustainable sourcing criteria, firstly, as a set of expectations that might come into force in the future, but for now are more there for educational and purpose, for educational and feedback gathering purposes. So the first stage, I would say, is to share them, to socialize, to make the suppliers aware. But I would like from maybe 2027 onwards, those sourcing criteria to become a formal requirement, such as the requirements that we now have in place for nature, for carbon. So I hope it gives you a little bit of context and why we started it and how can it be used in the future. And I'll pause here and hand over to Louise to talk a little bit more of the details.
Thanks, Anna. I appreciate the intro and the background. So, as Anna said, we've been working with Anna and the HSBC team for just over 12 months now, focused heavily on climate and then kind of pulling in nature as well. And our approach has been really focused on how we build kind of tools and support guidance solutions for category teams. When I say category teams, basically people doing buying roles. So it might be category teams, it might be regional procurement teams, it might be buying teams of people who are negotiating with suppliers on a regular basis, people who are contracting, people who are actually trying to embed, requirements with suppliers. What we found with kind of the climate side of the conversation is, I spent probably the best part of 17 years in procurement organizations, and a big chunk of that, at least 10 years, kind of back-to-back negotiating deals. And I always found I was that person that was too busy to take part in kind of central projects and anything that came on top of my job. I just always felt like I didn't have time for it unless it was packaged really well and it made sense to, how I integrate this into my category strategy, how I work with suppliers, and really how we negotiate deals, because that's what category teams do, and they're predominantly measured on savings. So really, we want to focus on how do we support a category team to deliver savings, how do we support them in delivering their work, how do we give them the tools that they need that enable them to understand nature impacts in their category and enable them to take action that makes sense in that context without overwhelming them with a load of content that kind of makes them switch off, essentially. We found this to be extremely effective when talking about climate, and we're taking a similar approach thinking about nature. So as Anna said, how do we understand risk in that category of spend? And the interesting side of this with HSBC is, we are starting talking about services categories. So a lot of procurement teams looking at services don't think about nature. They can kind of get their head around where the climate risk is coming from. But when you're talking about consulting services, or you're talking about technology services, actually understanding the connection into nature is really challenging. And even surprisingly, to an extent, in real estate as well, people think about a building in a city as being sort of a bit of a nature dead zone, rather than thinking about actually, firstly, nature that exists in cities, and also nature that exists in supply chains, and how you're impacting through the action you're taking in your supply chains. And it's a really interesting perspective that we see from category teams. So what we've been doing is so Ollie ran 4 or 5 meetings where we really talked about those categories of spend, kind of the services categories. We started to understand where people understand the risk and the challenges, where the narrative's not landing particularly well with procurement, and actually what we think is needed for procurement teams to actually act on the risk that we see across those categories. So we ran those sessions. There's a whole load of content created. I'm sure, Ollie, it's on some Miro boards and things like that somewhere that people can see. What we've been doing over the last couple of months is extracting that, really starting to understand how we need to think about risk and how we need to think about the procurement journey in that category and build it into an easy category snapshot. So how do we understand what the risk is in that category? And then series of actions or series of tools that category teams can use, or at least frameworks for tools. So we sort of start by thinking about prioritization, so how we understand the issues, where those issues sit in your supply chain or your value chain, and actually the proximity of that risk to you, and therefore what you can do in your role as a category manager. So with the belief that the closer the risk is to you in your value chain, typically through negotiation or through supplier engagement, the sooner you can act on it, or the more impactful the actions you can take. The further down the value chain, we need to have different, because of the way that supply chain tiering works, we need to have kind of different solutions for different risks that sit in different places in that value chain. So we're starting to describe the categories by their risk profile, by where those risks sit in the value chain, and then creating a series of actions that category teams can take to try to at least understand the risk better. It might be about visibility and transparency, to potentially act on that risk, and then also to understand the impact of that risk in your context of your organization. And we're also starting to look at the sort of the portfolio of tools that procurement has and uses on a daily basis when negotiating other transactions. So you have your contract. What can we put into contracts to improve suppliers on this journey? We have negotiations. How do we understand kind of a value proposition or a value exchange in a negotiation? Where can nature fit into that? And actually, where is there a cost to a supplier for making more progressive solution or decisions versus less progressive decisions? And then also thinking about supply performance management. What do you do over the life cycle with that supplier? And then even thinking about which suppliers you're working with. So actually, what's kind of the substitution options you have? And really, when we're thinking about substitutions, are we substituting kind of one bad thing for another bad thing, or are we actually making a positive substitution? So trying to lay out all of those procurement strategies that you have today. You would use all of those things to drive a reduction in supply risk. You'd use all of those things to create a reduction in cost, and we can use all of those things to create a reduction in nature risk as well, and also in climate risk, which is the other work we've been doing for Anna. So what the output looks like is a kind of a framework of prioritization, a clear action logic based on the kind of the influence that you have, a series of tools, and then really an understanding of how you apply basic procurement tools to support nature. that's going to be packaged in a PDF, so kind of a usable guide that you can share with your category teams. And then I'm sure we'll have conversations about how we kind of get that content out and how we make it a bit more shareable with calls or online sessions or something like that. And we will be presenting this in February at the Nature Peer Group event, and we'll be there for the whole, is it 4 days this year, Ollie, I think, in London, Monday to Thursday. However long it is, we'll be there for the whole session. So feel free to come and kind of quiz us and ask questions. And if you want us to build out on any of the content, we'd love to have that conversation as well.
Nice. Excellent. So just to summarize, everyone's going to get these sort of one-pager type things, where there'll be more than one page, won't they? I should imagine.
Yeah, we're currently trying to reduce them from about 12 pages each to sort of 4 pages. So we're currently going through the process of condensing it and trying not to lose the value in the content.
Yeah. What's the average attention span for a category manager when he looks at a document? Is it longer
three pages probably with nice pictures?
Excellent. So we're going to be producing those and sharing those with the peer group across these different, very common categories for many people, of course, in indirect. I wonder if also you might just touch upon what you've done with HSBC to sort of go beyond just creating materials. I know you've done some excellent role playing with the actual procurement professionals as well. Maybe you can talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Ollie. So we have kind of a strategy model at Bray we call Wayfinder, which is our strategy tool that we embed into procurement organisations to help category managers navigate climate and nature challenges. And the principle behind our approach is we do kind of play-based training. So we run a one-day activity with category teams, so about 14 people in a room, and we role play a life cycle with a supplier. So starting with a sort of transactional negotiation through to a huge sort of outsourced type contract. So moving from basically a small negotiation to a big negotiation through a series of different plays where we increase the complexity from sort of a commercial transaction, adding climate in, adding nature in, but getting the category teams to really start to understand where climate and nature fits in that process through play and through actually negotiating over the course of the day. And these simulations, the way that we structure the sessions is half of the team is the buyer, half of the team is the supplier, and they spend the whole day in role negotiating these transactions. And it's really fascinating because when we originally piloted this as a program, what we found is that using standard procurement language and positioning everything for procurement organizations and procurement kind of context, not talking too much about climate, not talking too much about nature, but just giving the teams the information that they needed to understand the risk from suppliers. Actually, they're able to role play and adopt the solutions really quickly. So during the day, especially when we piloted it, we didn't talk about climate once. We just provided them with information to compare different suppliers based on their carbon footprints or their carbon intensity and also the nature impacts. And by giving them the information they needed, they were able to make those decisions and to understand it. And that's why we use play, so that people can explore these topics. Once we've done those kind of training days, we then immediately go into a category conversation with those teams. So we do what we call a category deep dive, where we talk through and start to apply that learning immediately into the category before developing the category strategy. We've done this for all of the categories we spend now at HSBC, and we found that in 6 months, we went from teams really not understanding how to conceptualize climate and nature in their category and just seeing kind of big carbon footprint numbers and nature risks that they didn't understand, to actually being able to negotiate kind of carbon and nature into contracts, so into service levels, into reporting, into obligations, and the way that they describe the services. So the level of advancement we see through that program is really amazing, and it's a shame Anna's had to drop off, but it's been extremely impactful so far in HSBC.
Lovely. Excellent. Really good stuff. So whether it's now or later, if anyone's got any questions for Lewis, please do put them in the chat. Obviously, you'll get a chance to pick his brains if he's sticking around as well. I'm intrigued about what other categories we can look at. Obviously, we've started with indirect, given it's HSBC, which of course is relevant to many people, but it'd be fascinating to see how we can pull together these resources, and obviously make these resources updatable as well, and at the heart of the peer group, so people can access them, and category managers and procurement managers can actually use them practically, and that be a gift from the nature and sustainability professionals to their procurement colleagues to make it really practical. But thanks, Lewis. We'll look forward to hearing more from that. And yeah, if anyone's got any questions, Lewis, do put them into the chat as well. I'm conscious of time,
Thanks, Ollie.
and so we'd love to have Hannah. Are you there, Hannah?
I am. I'm here. Have you got my slides, Ollie, by any chance? Oh, thank you so much. Have a look.
There we go.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're Hannah Bell. You're not Hannah from Halion. That's not your full name, is it? So,
no,
welcome,
yeah,
Hannah Bell.
Thank you so much. Nice to see everyone. So, yeah, following on from sustainable sourcing, actually, but a slightly different area in which Anna and Lewis has just presented on. So it's probably quite good that I've got this slide here, just to kind of level set what we mean by sustainable sourcing. And if anyone doesn't know who we are at Halion, just as a reminder, we're the consumer healthcare divestment from GSK, which happened a good kind of 3 years ago now, I think. So we make brands like Sensodyne, Aquafresh, Theraflu, consumer healthcare brands. So the reason that I've come to present today is slightly selfish reason. So I wanted to update everybody on the work that we're doing. So we're in quite a good position now with our sustainable sourcing KPI, so I can run through that. But the real kind of meaty discussion that I'm wanting to have, or to get people's feedback on, is more around an issue that we're having with this KPI. And the issue is around data and limited assured level data for this KPI. So we'll come on to that in a minute, but before we get to the problem, I'll maybe update on some of the good work that we've been doing. And Anita, my colleague who works on this KPI, is also with us. So if you've got anything to add, Anita, then please feel free to come off mute. So yeah, I'll keep it quite brief in the interest of time. So obviously, in terms of sustainable sourcing, we've seen through other kind of presentations and other input from stakeholders on this call that can mean different things for different companies. But in terms of Halion, we define sustainable sourcing as making sure that we're taking steps to protect the environment, biodiversity, and ecosystems in which we source materials from. So we focus primarily on three main areas, which is agricultural derived materials, forest and marine derived materials. So that's things like paper, palm, corn and wheat, fish oil, etc. So we have a goal linked to all of these materials that we want to be sustainably sourced by 2030. So if we just move on to the next slide, please, Ollie.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you very much. You can see the list of materials that are in scope for our sustainable sourcing programme, and collectively across all of these materials now, we're above 90% sustainably sourced. So the goal is to be 100% by 2030, and currently what we will be publishing in our next external annual report is that we'll be at 90% across these materials. So we've made some really good progress across the last sort of couple of years with a number of these materials. And the way we define them as being sustainably sourced looks very different depending on the category. So, for example, paper, we define paper as being sustainably sourced, either having FSC certification or a similar credible certification, or having above 97% recycled content. And obviously that evidence needs to be a full chain of custody throughout our full suppliers, conversion mills, etc. So that's one way we would define something as sustainably sourced. However, with another material that we purchase, such as mint, we have our own mint program in relation to this, where we work with our strategic suppliers to co-create a program which looks at a number of different environmental factors. So we work with our big mint suppliers we work with the farmers in India to support the sanitation, to support their social rights, women's rights, water reduction, a number of different things. So how we define these is different, and we do that assessment each year to make sure that we're kind of looking at the right criteria. So as I mentioned, we will be, and if anyone's got any questions in terms of each specific material and how we develop that and kind of the criteria, more than happy to do like a deep dive session on that. But really, as I said, we've been reporting externally on this goal for the past sort of 4 years, 5 years, even longer, when we were part of GSK. And what we've seen, and what the kind of the problem statement that I think we've got really is around how do we make sure that we're collecting the data from the suppliers to prove this in the correct way? So as we move forward and we get feedback from like CSRD, we need to move to a assurance level data set. So in the past, we haven't had this, but moving forward, we need this. So we've been told that the ways of working that we currently have, where we would have conversations with suppliers, would confirm certification through FFC codes, RSPO codes, and we would use our internal SME knowledge to prove that something's sustainably sourced. That's no longer suitable. So we need to move to a much more robust methodology. So I'd love to just get the input from anybody on the call who has a similar material supply chain on how you guys are getting your evidence to report against this externally. So that's really the problem statement. And I don't know whether we're going to address this, Ollie, in a breakout session, or if we just jump straight into it now. I'm not sure what the best approach is.
Well, no, I definitely think we can discuss it a bit now. We've got plenty of time. So let's just take a moment and allow people to think about this and warm up. Has anybody got similar commodities, obviously, in their supply chain? Anyone got any thoughts on what Hannah's shared?
Hannah, I'd love to introduce you to my former colleagues at Unilever who are in impact and assurance, Ingrid Richardson in particular, who I used to work with on palm oil and has now gone into the newer role leading impact and assurance at Unilever, because the sustainable sourcing goals went through the same evolution. So Unilever had its sustainable agriculture code and its regenerative agriculture principles, but you used to either be able to ladder up to those through certification or even through self-verification. Obviously, that no longer stands. So they've built a whole methodology around the top 10 agricultural commodities. There's a weighting of these. Palm oil's the first one. But they'll be able to talk you through this evolution process and the process they went through with PwC to design this. So I'll link you up separately on email. But they're also talking about potentially doing this in February as well, a session on this. But
that would be super interesting. And we've had a quick chat with Unilever, but I think, making sure that, I think it's the data and assurance team. You're right that we need to really kind of have that discussion with. I would love to get their thoughts.
Because a lot of it sort of sits in Excel spreadsheets and doesn't even make it into CDP or CSRD eventually, and that's type of stuff.
Yeah, no, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, it's lovely, but we're still going back to Unilever for best practice, isn't it? Still. The amount of times I've introduced people at Halion to people at Unilever over the years is just still actually. Yeah, indeed. Hannah.
Yeah, hi, Hannah. Sorry, could you just one Hannah to another? This is AstraZeneca. So we have similar materials. I was just wondering, could you repeat how you're collecting the data at the moment? I just want to make sure I'm 100%.
Yeah, definitely. So we currently have a process, we call it a sustainable sourcing RFI process, and it is all through spreadsheets currently. And what we do is we send a supplier specific template. We've roughly got about 100 suppliers in scope for this KPI, and we send each of them a spreadsheet with a list of material codes that we think are in scope for the sustainable sourcing KPI. And then we ask them to fill out a number of different data elements. So it might be, what's the origin of the material? Have you got certification? What's the certification code, etc. So we ask them to populate that and send it back to us. We then aggregate and gather all of that data, and then that's the data that feeds the scorecard. The feedback, we've done a number of after action reviews with our suppliers because this approach, to be totally transparent, did not go down well. They said that out of a number of different customers, Halion is the one that's asking for the most in-depth information and the most frequent, with the most frequency as well. So we were doing this quarterly. We've pushed back internally and said every half year should be suitable for this scorecard, because obviously the suppliers were getting a huge spreadsheet every quarter. They were getting super frustrated and saying, there's no change, like, please accept this as, everything is still the same. So that's why we're trying to really just look at our approach, learn from others to see what best practice could be, so that we don't, have that kind of supplier fatigue. But yeah, happy to get your thoughts as well, Hannah, on if that's a similar process to what you guys take.
I mean, so yeah, I've been going through I would describe it as pain, as you with suppliers, and we're just doing it annually. So yeah,
Okay.
a big difference to your quarterly, because we are asking a lot of our suppliers already across the board on sustainability. And yeah, I'm interested in how you are defining assurable, and based off of that, how you would, or how there could be an industry-wide approach to collecting data. But we go out to suppliers, we ask them questions against the KPIs we're interested in, and we rely on that information, certificates they share, and then that being reviewed by a third party to confirm that it's all looking in order. So yeah, and also, yeah, I'd be very, I've actually been in touch with Unilever and haven't scheduled the meeting yet with the sustainable sourcing team. So happy to jump on and be involved, and think about how we can shape it.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, maybe we do that and we can, reduce the work for Unilever and have that same conversation. And we're currently doing a piece of work with Deloitte as well, and to be transparent and happy to share the output of that, because what we're asking them to do is to look at our current approach, basically, if we can, try and simplify it, but also look at the long-term solution, because I just don't think it's sustainable for everyone to keep sending questionnaires and emails to all of these suppliers at this frequency. Ideally, I'd like to automate this. So is it, for example, something that you build into your SAP system, so that at point of delivery, when a sustainable source material in scope is delivered, it's then captured through SAP, and you click a button, run a report at the end of the year, and it all comes up. That is, the ideal situation. But I think that's maybe longer term into 2027 onwards. But yeah, if there's a group that's interested in this conversation, I think let's get together and stay close on it.
This is super interesting. And I just wanted to add a kind of another data point to this whole conversation. So something I always find a bit confusing is why companies reach out to us, because often we'll get multiple companies in the same sector or role in the supply chain reaching out simultaneously. So like one month we had 6 engineering companies reach out to us all at once. And we're kind of going, okay, what's going on? And what we've had recently is trading companies. So a lot of people buy their, whatever it is, their commodities through intermediaries, these massive trading companies that just ship these things around the world. And so we're currently in conversations with quite a few of these who are basically asking us various different things. And one of the core things that someone's asked that's been really interesting is how can they develop more sustainable practices with their suppliers. So in that case, the farms, we're talking about food commodities largely, this particular example, that they can then achieve nature outcomes or resilience outcomes that they can then sell on to the customers they're working with. And that's because they've started to get people asking more and more of the questions that you're talking about at Helion. And so they're kind of clocking that actually there is a market for this. At the moment, your suppliers are getting annoyed about this because it's frustrating and it's more of a burden. And I think what I'm starting to see is this sort of the first rumours really of companies going, okay, this doesn't have to be annoying. This could actually be a market opportunity for them, because if they can then figure the customers want, both in terms of target delivery and being able to make appropriate claims, but also obviously the other stuff that comes with nature. So if you can then go, well, not only will we help you deliver your sustainability targets, but we can then give you some assurance that your supply chain is more resilient because we're working with suppliers not just on farm but in the surrounding areas or whatever it might be, that can actually then deliver real business benefits as well as although sustainability isn't a real business benefit, you know what I mean, something that might make the CFO stand up and pay attention. So I wonder if there might be a piece here in starting to figure out, and this could be a group project, what is the market need for this? What is it that different people want? And it probably wouldn't even be that hard, but just speaking to different people in it's almost a simple bit of social research. What is it you would want? What is it you might be able to get to pay for? Essentially, what might be the willingness to pay for different kinds of targets or resilience benefits or whatever it might be? And if we can start to put that together, then that essentially becomes an indicator of market demand that we can take to traders or suppliers and go, well, actually, this is a market which you could tap into. which then can help them get the justification internally for putting some effort into this and actually seeing if they can meet the needs.
No, I think it's a really good point, and I think it's something to look at. I think the only thing that I think might make that slightly difficult is having that, in terms of a centralized pot of data, if there's a simple way of putting it, in terms of where everyone can tap into that, is that as part of limited assurance, I think the criteria is that the supplier needs to confirm to that specific material code, delivery site, supplier, customer, that is what's been delivered. So it's still almost, you'd have to ask for that confirmation from the supplier that what you've sent us still meets these requirements. So I don't know if that makes it a little bit more complex in the sense of the data is readily available. I know from my knowledge and conversations with suppliers that is sustainably sourced, but the level of evidence and the way we get that, I think for limited assurance seems to be really, really strict. But yeah, I think it'd be good to map it out and then, like you said, see if there is kind of, maybe some kind of like shared solution.
I think especially because if there is then this requirement to go through and do that stuff and show the evidence, if they can then at least competitive advantage, this is something that we're doing that drives value for business, and that makes it you can have it perceived as less of a burden and more of an important part of the service.
That's good. Sounds good. So again, I mean, if there are anyone else, it don't have to be called Hannah, although we could get Hannah Hislop from Unilever, the Stone private director involved, just for the sake of it. Hannah working group. But I think it does strike me again, Lewis, me and you have discussed this many times, that once you look at things at a mint level or a commodity level, you can actually get a lot more interesting cross-industry collaboration on suppliers, which of course happens in multitude of different initiatives. But when you're certainly sitting in my place and I have 4,000 people from every industry you can imagine, all wanting to roughly reduce supply fatigue and do everything the same, the potential to kind of create these crossover conversations is quite interesting.
Yeah, completely agree. It's interesting, the conversation about supply fatigue, isn't it? Because it's hundreds of people with great intentions, as Sam said, all at a similar time, all having conversations with suppliers together. I mean, I guess that's one of the advantages of this group, is trying to think about how we solve for that. I think one of the conversations we were having a year ago, really similar, Hannah, about limited assurance with basically the Big Four auditors, was the lack of really clear, consistent guidance from the audit community about actually what assurable means. Like, let's start just by defining what assurable means and then almost work back from there. And often it's kind of at a company level data, it's at a really high level or it's a really granular level, and actually the practical actions sometimes happen somewhere in between. So that point you were making about SAP makes complete sense. For this order, what is the nature impact of that specific order? What's all the assurable data that sits with that specific order? You have the same problem when you're looking at product carbon footprints in the climate space as well. For that specific order, for those specific units, what's the product carbon footprint? We're having a conversation with a big tech company about that as a problem statement now. It's not necessarily the really important thing. What would be almost a better thing to solve first is what's the average impact over the previous 12 months that you can apply just to at least show progress, rather than trying to get to perfect, which is at an order level. That's what I mean by kind of that level in between. So I think it would be really interesting actually to have sort of an audit oriented discussion to begin with, to say, what does assurable look like? What are you really looking for, rather than using assurance as a sort of a bit of fear, and then trying to figure out how do we get a step forwards from where we are today rather than immediately to perfect, because perfect might require SAP to charge you a few £1 million a year to implement some new technology, which is an issue for everybody.
I agree. And I think that audit and assurance conversation is so critical, because we're doing so much work internally, whether it's sustainable sourcing or carbon reduction, where we think we're reducing the footprint, but from an audit perspective, we don't have the data or the evidence to show that. So externally, our footprint's not coming down, but internally, we know it is, because we're doing all of this great work. So yeah, like you said, I think it's that audit and data kind of assurance confirmation of what's the criteria and how is that going to be measured needs to be defined, but it's difficult.
It's such a consistent, so many organizations have exactly that specific problem. It's like, progress is happening, but you can't evidence it. And I think audit and assurance is sort of it's almost impenetrable as a concept. It's really difficult to have that conversation. What are we actually looking for? I feel like that's as part of all of these conversations, that's a nut that needs to be cracked. So really, what do we mean when we say assurable data? What do we mean when we say assurability? And what are we trying to prove? We're trying to prove progress. We're trying to prove perfect data, because actually the approaches are probably going to be quite different.
Yeah, that's true.
Cool. Excellent. Anyone else listening in that feels like they want to be part of that call, let us know. Put your name in the chat or put your hand up. Any other questions, Hannah? Otherwise, we're going to have a chance to talk about this a little bit more in a second as well. Christy, you can't say yes to everything. Well, you can. I mean, it's fine. But your middle name's not Hannah, is it, Krista, by any chance? Okay, fine. All right. Excellent. Well, thanks, everyone. That was really good. So we've got a bit of time left now. So we're going to go into some breakout rooms. So you can choose your breakout rooms, okay? So the purpose of these breakout rooms is, first of all, for you to have a bit of a chat with each other, chance for each other to ask a few more questions. You don't have to speak; you can just listen. That's obvious, but please do at least introduce yourselves. That's what the first thing I will ask you to do when you go into the room is. There'll be someone in the room, either Biodiversity or Melissa. Hopefully, you can help as well. Can help lead the conversation, but please, organise yourselves. If you wouldn't mind going around the room, just a quick introduction to who you are, one of maybe the reason why you've chosen this particular breakout room, and then what we'd like to do is again have a conversation. What would be useful? So again, use the opportunity to raise your question. Let's see if anyone else is also suffering that question or that challenge as well. But of course, what the team are doing and what we will be doing is listening to think about how we might be able to address this in February or at our next meeting as well. So promise that and believe that you'll be what you're sharing is obviously taking in good confidence, but obviously we're going to be using it to try and think about what to do next. Okay. Simple as that, really. So I've made some executive decisions about the breakout rooms. So I've given you 4 choices. So those 4 choices are you've got climate and nature. If you want to discuss how that intersects, which I know is very popular to many of you. So you may be feeling that your business ultimately is focusing too much on climate. How does nature fit into that? EUDR. Wasn't going to have it, but then lots of people want to talk about it because, of course, here we go again, another year of prep. So if you want to be talking about UDI, you can go to there. The business case for nature, very popular one, obviously, go in there. And then if you want to talk sustainable sourcing or procurement engagement with Lewis, Hannah, etc., and others, you can go there. Now,
interestingly, as we speak, the trilogue is going to be meeting, and it will be the week of December the 14th when we'll actually know what they came up with. And there's a lot of stuff out there in the press and stuff that it's a complete fait accompli. It's going to be what the Parliament Commission has said it's going to be, but it's not done till the ladies.
Not over till, yeah. I think it's just frustrating, isn't it? A bit of clarity wouldn't help. What a perfect segue to the people that were in the most popular room, the EDR room. We've just been talking about you and how funny it is that you still need to talk about it all. Do the EDR room want to give us a bit of an indication of what you've been discussing and what are you going to be doing for the next year? And is there anything that the peer group should be doing? Not more EDR clinics, surely. We ran enough of them last year.
Barney, do you want to? Otherwise, I will, or if anyone else wants to.
You take us away, Melissa, and then others can chip in.
Okay. All right. So we discussed obviously the imminent delay and what that meant for companies, and that they're companies looking for what the value is for all of their work and their investment if there isn't kind of an imminent law. How do they kind of justify that business case for all of the work and the expense of the tools, and what that value proposition there is? And we talked about different options. We talked about kind of the investment opportunities, the kind of the de-risking and the appetite to investors that creates. We talked about the kind of brand proposition of being DR compliant. Oh, sorry, there's a strange noise that's not coming from me.
Don't worry.
The brand proposition of being EUDR compliant a year ahead, and how that sets you out in the market. We talked about kind of what happens to the companies that have paid for a tool and with a year delay, how does that kind of work? I proposed the question, do we still need a session on EUDR? Ollie, I know you and I have talked about this a lot in February. I was of the opinion that probably don't, but it turns out I was wrong, Ollie, because definitely
join the club.
There definitely still is the appetite for it, because there's going to be this announcement in April, and also the companies are going to have to work out what they're doing on traceability. So I'm proposing that it's slightly broader on traceability and forest related commodities anyway. So I don't know if anyone else in the session wants to jump in and tell me if I was wrong or have anything to add.
I would just add something. I wasn't actually in the session, but I would just say that there's still going to be some announcements coming from the week of the 14th, once the trilogue have actually met with what they've actually finally come up with. And then that will be what's official. Yeah.
Okay. We'll keep ourselves tuned on that. Nice one, Tim. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a simplification of it. So first operators and all of that sort of stuff. So some people are now out of scope and things like that. So it still feels like there's still a fair amount of uncertainty still.
It's also interesting from some of our peer group members, like Oxford University Press. So they're proposing, and for McDonald's, their printed Happy Meal books, they're proposing that's now completely out of scope. So what happens to the work that's been done on those kind of printed materials, and how do we make it all sound like one thing and not have different traceability systems? And we've also got Metza Group presenting at the strategy days about their due diligence system for forest commodities, and that's in-house.
Okay, cool. One more minute on EDR. Does anyone got a suggestion about what might be useful for us as a peer group, given that we've got 600 people all worried about this, or most worried about it, or maybe less now worried about it, I guess. Is there anything in particular that you'd like us to pick up on? I'll have a pregnant pause.
Just to add to what Melissa said, I guess Ollie, if we could have Ollie and Melissa, sorry, if we could have a case study from a business that is, to the conversation we were having in our breakout room, a case study from a business that has, by the spring, a clear plan as to how they are going to drive commercial value from all the good EUDR work that they've done, but with the regulatory. Tim, I take your point. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but if it does, if the regulation is watered down, then if there's a business that's got a solid example of how they're still driving commercial value from all the people, the process, the tech that they've put in place to maintain really robust internal traceability, communicate that out to the market, etc., that might be quite an inspirational thing for others to hear from and think about all that work they've done and how they can also make best use of it.
Right, make the most of.
I'm sure we'll have customers in that sort of regard. Because I think, again, I think just one thing to mention is, I guess the proposed delay is one thing. To kind of call that companies will still need full traceability, geolocation, verifiable chain of custody, even once the law applies, right? Regardless. So obviously there's nuances about if you're a first importer, what that would look like, etc. But it gives organisations a bit of time to build a stable, scalable foundation instead of all rushing last minute, right? If it all comes in as we expect. So I think it's still going to be talked about in February based on what comes out at the end of December. Because if there's one thing we can be sure of, there's always a few surprises each time, right? So to Barney's point, I think there will be lots of examples of that, because the business impact in a positive sense of those that have already taken action is real. And we have lots of, 800 customers already who will be in that mode next year. So I'm sure we'll be able to find some interesting people to come and talk about that.
Yeah. And of course, Tim, you're, I think, in the peer group, one of the most adopted tools, if not the most adopted tools for EDR. So I bet you're interested in this from a number of points, without a doubt. Excellent. Okay. Should we go to business? Nature and climate. So that intersection. Now, love to know what you talk about. But what I'd really love to know is some subtleties or specifics that we should be covering in our climate and nature workshops in February. That's the selfish reason that I've got for finding out what you've been up to. But who wants to pick that up?
I can do it. And apologies to the speakers, because I missed your session earlier and just joined for the breakout. My favourite bit, the breakout room. So yeah, loads of discussions about how to bring the two, like different business structure, like how team structures and financing structures, and but three ideas for you. Three, yeah. Okay, first one is how do we ask questions of suppliers without asking any questions? How do we get data from suppliers without asking any questions? So there's lots of different data sources that exist already. Is it another round of questions, or can we do something without doing that? So that would be like Cheat's guide to no questions supplier engagement. Would be good on both climate and nature. Second one was we had a bit of a discussion on is it better to just engage one supplier or should you engage the industry? And so it might be interesting to look at what's the business case or the commercial strategies for consortiums versus direct engagement. And yeah, different best practices from the industry, I think would be really useful there. And then the third one, really about getting into the nitty-gritty of it. What maybe again on the same thread though, do we already know a lot of stuff? So what data are we already collecting in tools like RBA, Covardis, Supply Shift, etc. that we don't know? What don't we know what we don't know? Like what do we know that we don't know? You know, that is one of these things. And what do we know but we don't know that we know? Because we're already collecting
You've lost me. I don't know what you're talking about or what I don't know.
It's been a long day with you. I don't know.
I get the sentiment. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Anyway, 3 ideas for. Does the team want to add anything else?
Anything else?
No, I think you've captured it all very nicely there. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Ashlyn. That's what we'd like to see. That's great. Very interesting. Made some interesting thoughts about that. Okay. I'm going to skip sustainable sourcing because we had lots of chats with Hannah and she's also not here anymore. So we'll go straight to the business case for nature. What are you guys discussing? How much further do we need to burrow into that? Quite a lot by the sound.
So we had a really good chat. There's a variety of different kind of angles people are coming at it. People are being asked to make the business case, obviously, which is perhaps unsurprising for people who joined the roundtable on that exact conversation. What we spoke about largely was the fact that there's often people ask for specifics. People ask for specific numbers, for specific examples, for evidence, all this kind of stuff, which often simply doesn't exist because this sector is still quite nascent. And then also people come from different angles. So you'll have different stakeholders who want very different things or who are interested in different kinds of forms of evidence in order to make the business case from their perspective. One of the things we then spoke about quite a lot was the power of stories and the power of storytelling as a way of helping people understand this and kind of giving them a mental framework for sort of getting the idea in their head of how a business case of nature would come about. And we spoke a bit about what's happened in the chocolate market with cacao. The prices of cacao skyrocketed largely due to deforestation in Africa and climate change impacts combined. And we then sort of, so by the best way, we have a kind of a sort of story library that we're putting together of different kinds of stories that we use that can we come across, because someone highlighted that actually one of the problems is how do you go out and find stories? It's not actually very necessarily easy to kind of just stick it into ChatGPT or Google, tell me a good story about nature that I can use to convince people at our company. And so this kind of started to come up with hopefully the seed of a potential peer group project idea, which would be to figure out what are the different stories that different sectors might need or might be compelling for different audiences. So, if you sell paint, for example, cacao probably isn't going to be a very good story.
No,
so much.
You can't eat it.
I mean, it's a lovely story, but it's not necessarily got that much to do with,
I really tickled you, Emily, that, didn't it?
Yeah, sure did.
So potentially what we could do is sort of do a quick survey. It could be a survey we do with the group, but a social research to understand who are they trying to speak to, what sectors are they trying to speak to, what are the different kind of areas where we might need different stories, what would the ideal library look like, and then a bit of legwork basically of someone going out and consultant going out and finding these stories and piecing them together, because part of what makes a good story compelling is not just the narrative, but also the evidence. So I won't tell the whole thing now, but one of the things I like about the cacao story is Lindt have had a 7.8% increase in profits in one of the worst years ever for chocolate because of their supply chain efforts, whereas Hershey's, who buy on the open market, have had to increase their prices by 10%. And you can put their share price graphs next to each other and show that Hershey's has peaked and dropped and plateaued, and Lindt has just been going up quite casually. Which suddenly, when you put that in front of someone, you can see that this directly has business case impact. People are making more money out the fact that they invest in their supply chain. So, kind of, I guess the piece of work would be figuring out what stories people in the peer group need, and then going out and trying to find these compelling examples, writing them out, as prose or anything, but going, here is a folder with share price graph, these examples or evidence as to newspaper articles, where it might be, so then people who are then creating these stories with audiences can just draw on that. You don't necessarily have to copy and paste anything. You just go, here's a folder with images and links and evidence what they need.
Yeah, so a sort of business case generator, isn't it? Surely this sort of stuff exists, but again, if it doesn't, then I think you go even beyond that of putting that data and information into our GPT and have it create business case templates in theory, particularly if we worked on what the best practice template looked like, and then it called upon the library of information. That'd be relatively easy, I think, to do. Cool.
So a slight difference there is it's not fully the business case. It's more the story that then helps someone make
component parts of it.
Yeah.
And how you put it together and then how you use it is a whole nother
of course.
Yeah.
I think it's one of these things that you would imagine it exists, but I don't think it does. Cool. It's part of it is the research required to pull out the story is it is a chunk.
Okay, cool. No problem. You can do that, Sam.
Happy to.
All right. Amazing. Lovely to see you all. Hopefully see many of you in February. I think I am, actually. I'm looking at the list. So great to see all of you. Thanks so much. We're here all of the time. We're never off. So do let us know if you've got any questions or ideas or problems or challenges. Otherwise, we'll see you again soon. And enjoy opening the next door of the Advent calendar. I'll see you soon.
Cheers.
Have a lovely day.
Great. Thanks very much.
Everybody. Bye, everybody.
Bye.